with Brian Hall, who's just returned from Guyana, and he mentioned that surprisingly there are a lot of people named Brian in Guyana. And so it just occurred to me, I was thinking of my grandpa here lately. He passed away a few years back, but when I was growing up, my grandpa always called me Bryant. Well, my name's Brian, of course, but he always called me Bryant. He was my next door neighbor. I spent a little bit of time almost every day with him, especially in the summers. We would go, he would take me, we would run beagle dogs. He was a rabbit hunter, but he would always call me Bryant. And so one day, I got up the nerve to ask Pap. I said, Pap, who do you think I was named after? And he went, well, probably that old news reporter, Bryant Gumbel. And I said, but Pap, that's not my name. It's Brian. And he went, huh. And then, of course, later that day, he called the house and he said, Bryant, come up here. I need you to fix my VCR. So that was a vain attempt to get Pap to remember my name, but Brian made me think of that.
My grandfather always called me Scott. My middle name.
Okay. Well, you know. So, okay, in considering this this topic, I want us to first define the words we're dealing with. We're dealing with don't run in vain. So the first word, vain, for purposes of this discussion, is defined as producing no result or useless. The second word, run, obviously is moving at a speed greater than walking. So in looking at this and examining this and studying this, I want us to keep those two words in mind throughout our discussion. And let me point out, I'm not a big talker. I'm going to need a lot of discussion tonight. I'm going to be leaning on you all to help me out as we study this matter, as we go through it, as we discuss it. I'm going to be throwing out a lot of questions to everyone, and I hope that you'll participate. And this study will go in a direction that helps us all grow. The first thing I want to throw out there to everybody and kind of open it up was the question that was presented to me for the study. The question goes, sometimes people think they are running in such a way to receive the prize only to find that they have run in vain. What is it that causes people to be deceived, thinking they are on a spiritual run? So, kind of a first impression thought. You know, when I first looked at this topic, I had a first impression. So I want to throw it out there out of the gate to everybody to see after reading that statement. And I can present it again if you would like. But what's your first impression? What does it mean to you all to run in vain? Does anybody have any initial thoughts on that topic? I'm sorry, what was that? Run without going anywhere? Okay.
Sometimes, it would be the directions you were given before you started running.
Okay.
The tactics and if you don't get the information straight or correct, then yes, you may be wrong on the
Okay. So a foundational element to it. Okay. Do you have anything?
Yeah, every morning down in Guyana, unfortunately, David and I were kind of pulling up the rear of our group. We were running a little late, like meeting the truck to go to the compound and so on. And one morning, I was hustling to get to where I was supposed to be, and I kind of ran there, only to find that I had set my alarm an hour early. So I ran in vain. I was not late. I was an hour early.
Okay.
To me, it seems like you spend a lot of energy
somewhere on the course, they go the wrong direction, they take a wrong turn. And you don't just get to go back to a point and start over. You're just disqualified. That's it, stop. You don't get to finish the race. Done. And everything that they invested during all of that time is gone because of a mistake that they made that disrupts it all.
This may just kind of repeat what everybody else has said. I'm a teacher, and there have been times in the past where I have given an assignment, and a student has worked very diligently, very hard, and turned it in, but it was what they did was the wrong assignment. So, I can applaud their effort, but as far as score goes, there's no score because they did not complete the work that was assigned.
Okay. But you didn't do what they were asked to do. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Orrin.
I had a friend who was agreed to lead a prayer at a person's funeral at the gravesite after a funeral, and he knew where he was going. He just knew where he was going. He knew where the gravesite was. He had a special way to get there. He never showed up. He knew where he knew, but he never paid attention to the instructions, the directions. He just knew where he was going. He was confident he was going. He went the wrong way. And so, in the sense, you can start off with the sense that I know exactly where I'm going, but unless you have pinpointed the direction, have the directions, you might not reach the goal. He drove in vain, and he got there after the people broke up. It was all over.
Okay. Anybody else? So I think, is it fair to say, from what I'm hearing, there's some consensus about, you're ending up somewhere you didn't want to be, but you have worked or put in a lot of effort that essentially resulted in something you didn't want, and maybe you were misguided. Is that fair to say? From what I'm hearing. So, but for the purposes of this discussion, I think that is very important that we consider the foundation. I think it's very important that we consider what we're supposed to be doing. But what I hope that we will be discussing at the end of our time tonight will be looking at ourselves, looking at our lives, and considering evidences. And what I mean by evidences is, how do we know that we're not running in vain? What is the evidence that I need to see in myself as I look at my own life, at my own spiritual walk? What should I see? What should I see in myself that I know that I'm following God in a manner that's pleasing to Him? What fruit do I need to be seeing, essentially? What does that look like? That's where I want us to end up. And if I don't see that, what do I need to do? So I hope that we get to that point. I really want everybody to discuss the topics. As we go along, I'm going to throw out a lot of questions. I'm really eager to see what you all have to say to some of these questions that I've been considering over the time that I've been preparing for this. So going back to running in vain, a verse that came to me that I know we're all very familiar with, of something that gets us to that end point that is useless or is not where we want to be, is Matthew 7:21 and 23. If you have a Bible and you want to turn there, please do. I'm going to read it here, but it's Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 to 23. In this particular verse, Jesus states, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, 'Lord, Lord, Have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. I never knew you. Depart from me. I never knew you. Depart from me. Now, those are words that I certainly do not want to hear. And I don't think any of us do either. But for our purposes tonight, I want us to focus on the part of the verse, I never knew you. I never knew you. And so right now I'm throwing out the question, how do we know God? How do we know Him? Any thoughts on that? I know it's a pretty big question. It's a pretty big question, but initial thoughts on that.
Well, I know the scriptures teach that those who knock will be open, and those who seek shall find. And so it seems to me that's at least partially the answer.
And you seek God through seeking His Word.
Okay.
You know, I think it's an interesting thing when you speak to people who are in other denominations who are so confident about their faith and confident that their worship is true to God. And yet, if they find out you go to the Church of Christ, they say, well, I'm going to have to work. David's had this happen to him a lot at work with people. I'm going to have to start studying my Bible a little more before we have another conversation about this. And I hear that thing when he tells me that to people, and I think, isn't that sad? Isn't that sad to say I'm confident in my faith, I'm confident where I attend church and how I worship, but I don't know my Bible well enough to answer the questions that you're asking me. So how are you worshiping God? How do you seek God? How do you know God? You don't know what His Word says.
Okay. I think nobody questioning His Word is certainly a component. And for our discussion, I want us to focus on, on what we, what we're doing or not doing, or looking inside ourselves and asking ourselves the question, what can we do? What can we do to know God or become closer to God? And knowing His Word, absolutely. That's absolutely important. Are there any other ways? How do we ask? How do we seek? How do we knock?
I feel like the Word, as Melissa was saying, is so critical because it gives us sort of like talking points with God. When we're really familiar with what He said, then we're able to, go to Him knowing what He's promised and what His character is like, and in that develop a relationship that's
So is it fair to say you're equating it to a relationship? Yeah. Okay. Anything? Anybody else? Do you have something?
I think that, if somebody says to me, how do you know? How do you know the Lord? How do you know God? Well, I know Him personally through the experiences that I've had in my life and in becoming a child of God. And I think every day that, somewhere in my day, there will be something that I will say to God, what should I do? What should I do? And you wait for an answer. So I think, how you know God is through the relationship that you have with Him. Now, it can be strong or it can be weak. And I think all of the things that she was talking about makes us strong. We have to read, we have to know the Bible, we have to practice what we preach, as they say, and show people around us that we are Christians, we are children of God, and we try to put that forward in our daily lives. He lives within us.
Right. Right.
And living within us, we have a conscience, we make decisions, we know good from evil, and I think that's all part of how we know God.
Is it fair to say that the relationship grows over time? You become closer and closer, and I've, Mike's preached on it. We've heard it many times. If you're not growing closer, you need to really examine. And so that's one thing I'm thinking about this evening is when I go back to evidence of knowing that I'm not running in vain, knowing the Word, relationship with God, which I think is spending time, has a lot to do with it. Of course, the more time I spend with Haley, the closer we are. There's times when if we have to be apart, that's no fun. We always have to try to spend some time together when we're apart to make that a priority. I think that's important for any relationship. Anything else? I think relationship is encompassing. So if we break down the relationship, we said reading the Word. I think I heard prayer. What's the role of prayer in this relationship? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we make ourselves known to God through prayer and what we desire, and we have to have faith that He hears us, so that's part of that relationship. It's just having full confidence that God, you have that relationship, that God knows you, and you can go to Him.
Right. I agree. I think it's a vital part of the relationship. So, if we say that we know God, we grow in God by our relationship, what's the evidence in our daily life of that relationship? What's the when we examine ourselves, what should we see? And maybe that's not a good way of asking the question, but how should that make us feel? Assurance.
The words that came to my mind when you first posed that question were words like humility and peace. But then I thought, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, all of those spiritual fruits, it seems to me are part of the answer to this question as well.
Well, I certainly agree. I think that's where I'm going. I know peace is I want to talk about in a few minutes is one that I particularly contemplated and considered quite a bit here recently. The fruits of the Spirit, obviously, are very important. Anything else beyond that? I mean, is there a particular way? And I'm not very good with words. I can't describe things. Is there anything anybody can articulate by how they feel when they're closer to God? How do you feel? Haley said assurance. I mean, do you feel different? I mean, even in our Christian walk. I mean, I think I can honestly say there are times when I know that I feel closer, that I just have a different feeling. There are times when it's difficult, when whatever's going on in my life, whether it's work, whether it's, just all the demands, it's not like those are different. At times it's not like you don't have those things, but I know that when I'm closer to God, I just feel different. It's just better. Every part of my life is just so much better. I'm surrendering to Him. I mean, it's like it's just fantastic.
I feel like I have more perspective the closer that I am to God. When people get disturbed by political things, I'm at peace because God is in control ultimately. The world was always the world. When we went through fertility problems for years, I had a greater peace because I accepted the fact that God never promised me earthly things that I wanted. And there was actually a satisfaction and peace in accepting that what we wanted and how we may end up having children may not be in the ideal and perfect way that everybody else took for granted. But I had an understanding that that's not the way the world was created and the way things went. And instead of railing against God and being upset about that, it actually gave me more peace to accept it and accept that the plan may work out differently. So when I have, Dad just had surgery yesterday and things like that, I was in perfect peace when my mom said, "Don't worry about coming to the hospital." I went with Isabel on a field trip because I knew that peacefully what was going to happen was going to happen, and we're going to deal with it as it happens. So I feel like perspective gives me greater peace and calm overall because understanding where you fit and how life works in God's overall plan lets you know what things to worry about and what things to let go. So yes, you should feel greater peace overall when you're closer to God because you understand where you fall in the great scheme of things.
I think that's a great. Thank you for that perspective. That I like that. I really do.
I think we should build a level of comfort. You're talking about the demands of the world sometimes really get hard.
Yeah.
We should be confident to know that the closer we are to God, the closer He is to us, that we're not doing it alone.
Right.
We're together. No matter how bad it seems, we have faith that God will work out.
Right.
It always works.
I think the closer you draw to God, the less you worry about the world and the cares and the trials and the things that come your way. Maybe it's those things that initially draw you closer to God, the troubles and the trials and the cares. But there is, I call it, I don't know, there are two things that came to my mind when Melissa's talking about. It's on blessed assurance. There's an assurance there, and then the term peace that passes understanding.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about that as well in this study. Is that verse? Anybody else? Anything else? Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I'm thinking of a different word, but ties all this together, and that's clarity. When you have a problem, a deep, wrenching problem that cannot be uttered with words, you take that to the Lord, you rise with clarity. If you have a question take it to the Lord, you find clarity. If you doubt or wrestle, or even overcome with thanksgiving, you rise, having taken it to the Lord, with clarity, which gives comfort, peace, the joy, the assurance. And so then there's no room for doubt or worry or anxiety. And some people think that the only people in this world, or the only people in the church, let's be more specific, that are really plagued with trouble are people that maybe new Christians. What I mean to say is, the longer you are in faith, let's just say matter of factly, some people think that church leaders are not plagued with worry and anxiety and trouble. And that's not true at all. In fact, a church leader can be plagued more with temptation and more kinds of temptations than someone who just became a Christian. It'll be different. But anyone that thinks an elder is not plagued with difficulties, you need to spend 1 week in an elders meeting to listen to what elders have to deal with. But no matter what, you can rise from the prayer. And I don't mean, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. You rise from passionately crying to the Lord. You rise to clarity.
Oh, I think clarity. I agree with that. And kind of to go along with what you said there, isn't it a true statement that the more we grow, there's going to be other things that come at us? Maybe when we grow closer to God, there's going to be different levels. The enemy's going to use different tactics, different ways to come at us.
Job, which the Jewish people believe that he suffered for decades. The only reference in the Bible is Job says these many months. Could have been 2 months, could have been 3. It could have been 1,000 months. We don't know. But he was blameless. Now that tells me he was pretty near to the heart of God. But yet look at all that he suffered. When you draw close to God, sometimes that suffering increases, but it drives you to the Lord.
Give something.
Yeah, I think though, most readers on Sundays when we come together and commune with the Lord and take the Lord's up, I get strength and comfort from that. And I talk to people that don't necessarily do that, and they say it just kind of, it's all and not don't mean much. But I don't understand that because I get comfort and strength from it every week.
Right. I would hope so. It should mean something every week, and I think it's an important reminder, something that I was examining or contemplating, or is how the fact that we do that every week and we commune with God to me, is a reminder that I need to remember Him every day, in every part of my day, and everything that I do. He's everything. He's everything to us as a Christian. We should surrender everything to Him, and that's one of the ways I've been looking at it recently. Is that the taking of the Lord's Supper every week is a reminder to me to remember Him in everything that I do, not just on Sunday morning or Sunday evening. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So, one thing I'm gonna throw something out there as an evidence that I feel in my own life. A word. We've heard clarity. We've heard perspective. A word that is really important to me now is trust. It's something that I've really been examining. And trying to ask myself the question, am I trusting God? You know, we've talked about, do we know God? What are the evidences that we know God? To me, one of those evidences is trust. I'm asking myself the question, do I trust God? And so I'm throwing it out there to you all. When I say, how do we know that we trust God? What does that mean to you all? What does that bring to mind? How do you know that you're trusting God?
To me, it's when you face the worst possible thing you face in your life, and you come out of your prayer and walk with God, and have the peace that whatever happens, I'm okay. Because I've spoken to God about it, I've prayed about it, God knows about it, and whatever God's will is, it will be.
Right.
And you can come to that and feel at peace, and I think that's the trust I'm thinking.
I don't feel that. When I'm anxious and I'm worried, that makes me introspectively say, am I trusting God? Like David in the Psalms, just continually, even when the circumstances and even his own desire, was not necessarily to be very hopeful. He would say, why are you downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in the Lord. Tell us so. You know where your help comes from. Say it. And being aware that just like the fruit of the Spirit is evidence that we're in Him, if we're experiencing the opposite, if we're anxious and not feeling self-control, then maybe I need to go to Him and realize I'm not trusting.
What are the when you think of somebody in this life, a fellow person that you trust as much as you can trust anybody, what brings about that trust?
You know they're going to do what they say they'll do, and they have your best interest at heart.
Okay. They're going to do what they say they're going to do, and they have your best interest. What else?
When I work with people on the concept of trust, and especially rebuilding trust, my definition has always been repeated good behavior over time. And that trust is not the assurance or the promises or the things that somebody says. It is seeing their behavior in action over time, so that I learn to trust them because of their patterns. And so when I work with people where trust has been violated in a relationship, there's always that period where they have to understand that you can make all the promises and all the apologies and everything else in the world that you want, but there's going to have to be repeated good behavior over time to truly ever rebuild trust again. And so that's my definition of trust.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree. The biblical perspective of faith is based upon evidence, the things that are seen. You know what tomorrow holds, or you know that tomorrow's going to be okay, no matter what happens. Based upon what you know yesterday. Therefore, you have comfort or assurance, clarity, peace today. That's what Bible faith is. Blind faith is throwing all logic out and stepping out on nothing. That's not Bible faith. That won't send anyone. That won't allow anyone to access heaven. That's just a leap in the dark. Bible faith is having the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, and it's based That's why science and the Bible are best of friends.
A strange thing to come out of a government study about Enron, somebody made the conclusion that trust is the 5 C's. That is caring, consistency, congruity, candor, and consistency, and competency. Those 5 things you need to build and maintain trust. If you don't walk the talk, you break trust. If you don't speak candidly and open honestly, you break trust. Those are the 5 C's. That's what I was always taught. Trust is built from. Certainly, we get that. It occurs over time. I think Christian trust is perhaps something slightly different. There's a certain amount that you have to trust that there will be something that you have not seen. He says faith is the assurance of things you haven't seen. You don't know that. That is a non-human reaction to that trust. It's different than human trust.
You know, something that as I'm hearing all of this, something that is occurring to me is repeated good behavior, or you know, there's a consistency of the things that have happened in our life to us. How do we acknowledge that enough? Do we acknowledge what God's done in our life enough? You know, any thoughts on that? I'm just sitting here asking myself, do I acknowledge what God has done for me enough? And you know, He's done more, and I can't earn what He has done for me. I mean, I just can't do it. But do I acknowledge that He saved me? Have I acknowledged the blessings that He has given me? Do I, you know, maybe that's a simple thought, but to me, I think it's a powerful one when associated with trust. Is that just look at our lives? We have so much to be thankful for, and that may be the epitome of trust. You know, Donna's definition, or the 2 words to me were the very definition of trustworthiness. That's how I would define trustworthiness. And if God's not the definition of trustworthiness, I don't know what is. So we've got a couple more minutes here. Let me just get to this. If we're not seeing these things, if we're not seeing the peace in our life, if we're not seeing the trust, if we're not seeing these evidences that we talked about, and we're running, we're working hard, we're doing all the things that we believe we're supposed to be doing, we're not doing anything wrong necessarily. What do we need to do? What, you know, that's pretty scary to think that you're not necessarily doing any, you know, you're not out in the world doing anything bad, but you're not necessarily bearing fruit. You know, what do we do? What do we do at that point? How do we invigorate our relationship with God? Any thoughts on that?
Brian, what you described sounds like someone who is not convicted. I don't know how you convict yourself. I don't think you really convict yourself, but somehow you have to come to the realization that you are in fact convicted. And apart from that, these other things, I don't think can.
Is the very acknowledgement, the recognition that the things that we've talked about, the evidences or the fruit, are not taking place, is the very the conviction that we're talking about. Is that fair to say? Okay.
Much of what was said tonight is in Hebrews 10:22 through 25. And at the end of that, it is presented not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, but we are to exhort
I certainly agree. Certainly agree. Anybody else? Well, I think we're about out of time. Any other closing thoughts?
You know, when you put your trust in God, you have to give up a little bit of that trusting only in yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's a lot. I just, people are so afraid.
You die to yourself, right? Yeah.
They're afraid to make that step and trust some other power. It's like, they feel like they
Right. It's not really, I heard somebody say recently, our walk with God is not a transaction. It's not that. It's surrendering all. It's surrendering our life to Jesus, to God. Okay. I thank everyone for
It got quiet before I got up here, so I assume that means I better get going. If you want to mark the song of invitation, will be 9:48. 9:48. And we're going to start with 991. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wanderer's rod. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems off so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one.
I had an interesting contrasting day today over the same type of an issue. All day long, like many of you, or maybe you were keyed into it and heard it all the time, or maybe you just heard about it, but you know about the bomb threats or the bombs that were mailed to different people all day today. And they were constantly talking about it all day. And of course, the discussion was about, well, who did it? Where did it come from? How did it start? Why was it done? And of course, the vast majority is it has to be because of a disagreement on issues. And somebody disagrees with these people, and so they're sending bombs. At lunch, I had a lunch with two people with whom I disagree. Just met them 3 weeks ago. We knew we disagreed. We didn't know a lot about why we disagreed. And we sat down and we talked for 2 hours, trying to understand why there has been disagreement between our two groups. Now, according to what I've been hearing all day, I should have sent them a bomb. Because that's obviously the way to handle a disagreement. When you disagree with somebody, you make a pipe bomb and send it. That's obviously the truth. But I wonder how many of those situations that they will sit down and have lunch together and say, why do we disagree? We're not people who mail pipe bombs to each other in the church. but we mail verbal pipe bombs. Because when I talk about somebody else behind their backs, I'm actually throwing a bomb, hurting their reputation, blowing it up. When we offend each other, when we have problems with each other, if we don't sit down and talk about it, we're blowing up relationships. You see, it really does help us to understand life better when we just keep our eyes open and notice what's happening out here, and we then can say, ooh, I don't want to be that way. In the church, we don't need to be lobbing bombs. We need to sit down across a table and say, why is this the way it is? I know what Paul said to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 10, that you all speak the same thing, that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and the same judgment. Well, it's not possible for us all to agree 100% on everything. Nobody can do that. If you're like me, you don't even agree with yourself sometimes. So perfectly in agreement with everything everybody teaches at one time is not what he's talking about. He's talking about unity. And what he's talking about is that you sit, you speak, you think, and you come to understand. So we've got a choice. When we have problems, we can either sit and talk, or we can take today's lesson and just lob a bomb. Well, I know which one's going to work, and I know which one will lead to eternal damnation. Tonight, I'm glad that God didn't lob a bomb in our direction, but rather he laid out an opportunity for me to get it right. If you need him or us tonight, will you come as we stand and sing?
Let's sing the first and fourth. I am resolved no longer to linger, charmed by the world's delight. Things that are higher, things that are nobler, these have allured my sight. I will hasten to him, hasten so glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee. I am resolved to enter the kingdom, leaving the paths of sin. Friends may oppose me, foes may beset me, still will I enter in. I will hasten to him, hasten so glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee.
We're grateful everyone has been able to be out tonight. Hopefully your Bible class was very beneficial for you. Just a couple of announcements before we close tonight. College students and anyone else who would like to help, we need to help set up for the preschool, and a reminder that we do not need to set up the library. There will be a ladies' self-defense class tomorrow evening here at the church building. There's no charge for the class, and ladies should dress in comfortable, loose clothing. A reminder that the hayride and cookout is this Saturday. Come for the fellowship. It starts at 4, but come when you can.